Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, co-chair of DSW. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. This community has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade, and this week we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors, whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors, who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. Founder Track, Kickstart, Growth Track, Friday Health Plans, Developer Track, Quizlet, Product Track, Palantir, Designer Track, Battery 621 in the Public Works, People Track, Exactly, and Spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to B-Side Fun, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pine Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget to use hashtag Den Startup Week to share your experience and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Welcome to this session of Denver Startup Week. I'm Serene Pappenfuss, a principal at Kickstart Fund. We're on a mission to build great companies in the Wild West by backing the boldest entrepreneurs with capital, community, and expertise for the journey. A lot of VCs happen to invest in Colorado. At Kickstart, we focus on it. We love our Colorado startups, Sondermind, Nomad, Pomp, and Havenly, just to name a few. Because we were among the first seed funds in the region, we know what it's like to start something before others understand your vision, which means we're willing to lead investments in promising teams. We use our experiences to grow your startup and recruit top talent. Our portfolio is filled with visionary founders like you who are committed to moving the whole ecosystem together. It's the network effect in full effect. Raising venture capital is more than swapping shares for money. It's inviting the right investors to complement your team. We hope we'll be your choice for seed funding in the Mountain West, and we hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There's something for everyone at DSW, thanks to all of our community members who submitted their best content to make this week what it is. And thank you for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all, especially our founder track sponsor, Kickstart. With that, please enjoy this session and the entire week ahead.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be here with you all for Denver Startup Week. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump right on in to this session. Before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the format of this session today, because we do have a 90-minute session, and that's a little bit of time. Not sure if we'll take the entire 90 minutes, but one of the things that I'm going to encourage you to do is, if you have a notebook, or if you have just even a piece of paper, I'm going to encourage you to go ahead, get it out, get a paper and pen right now, because there not only are going to be things that you might want to jot down for notes today from the presentation, but there's also going to be really good questions that you can ask yourself and use to reflect on in a little bit. My name is Amanda McLernon, and I am going to be the host of today's session. What we're going to do is we're going to have a keynote from myself, starting here just in a minute for about the first 30 minutes, and then we're going to move into a kick-ass panel. I'm so excited. In a little bit here, I'm going to be introducing Danielle and Stephen Quang, and I'm so pumped because they're both brilliant entrepreneurs with experiences with burnout. And we have intentionally had a small group today because we really do want to have just a really good conversation about burnout, what it looks like, what it feels like, how to avoid it, as our title says. Right now, as we get into the keynote portion of this, I will be presenting my screen, so I can't see the chat, which is okay, because we're going to move through the presentation. And then when we get to the panel portion, when we get to kind of the open chat, I am very, very much going to be encouraging you to get active in the chat, ask questions, and participate with us. So right now in the chat, though, what I really would like you to do is I would love for you to introduce yourself and the company that you are with, and you can absolutely add a link. We are all about networking here at Denver Startup Week, so go ahead and drop it in the chat. And I also want you to say, what is the main reason, like what is your intention for attending this session today? Have you either experienced burnout and you're looking for ways not to experience it again, or have you been somewhat lucky in your life and you haven't hit burnout yet, but you are definitely trying to avoid it? So go ahead, put that in the chat, and let's get into it. Now, burnout is the buzzword of 2021, it feels like, but I'm really glad it is. And the reason I'm glad it is because part of the reason I submitted this session is I started my first Denver Startup Week experience back in 2017 when I moved to Denver. And I have to tell you, I burnt out right after Denver Startup Week. I know many of us really like to go hard for Denver Startup Week, and you go hard in a lot of ways. You know, you go hard in the hours that you work. You go hard in how many different activities you do in a day. You go hard in how you spend money this week, whether you're Ubering to and from all sorts of events, whether you're going out to dinner because you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten in forever because I'm doing so many things. And so I thought it was really relevant for us to talk about it this period. Now, the other reason it's really relevant is I'm not sure if anyone else read this article, but this is a report from Denver's KDVR, and burnout is more likely in Aurora and Denver than some of other places all over the country. We are actually two of the top 25 cities in the nation where we are more likely to experience this type of fatigue. Well, why is that? And how do you measure burnout? Well, Smart Asset, which is a data company, really looks at burnout in three categories. They look at the work schedule, they look at financial stress, and they look at the overall health and well-being. Now, I do want you to write those three things down, because I think a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we can be really good at looking at our revenue numbers and looking at our maybe our profit numbers if we've gotten to a point of that, and maybe really good at looking at our margins and really good at looking at our future looking plans. But I know a lot of entrepreneurs who have a little bit of a more difficult time looking at that. What is my work schedule? Especially if you are transitioning from being a W-2 employee to doing something on your own, you might be working double time, especially if you are coming into the market as a mother or a father or someone raising a child. And I think we all can look at this and say, I don't know anyone who's ever started a business or runs something, runs a funded company that is not under financial stress. And so I think it's good for us to look at those three categories and say, how am I doing in these three categories in my life? I had to take a really big look in the mirror with myself with all of this. I told you my name a little bit earlier, but I am the founder and CEO of McLernon Co, the social media agency, and Keep Social Media Social. The Keep Social Media Social is a methodology, a way to show up with social media, and a magazine. And I was struggling. I had gotten so obsessed with the digital world that I completely forgot about the physical world. Now, I want us to do something here too, because I think this is really interesting. If wherever you are, if you could just go ahead and put your hands up like this. It's a little silly, but please do it. What's really interesting is that we are right now in two places at once. We are here in the physical world. If you look at your hands, this is the physical world. We are also here in the digital world together. Now, if you happen to pick up your phone while you're on this session with me, you're going to be in three places at once. And while we've really never been more connected through all of these tools, what we are seeing across the board, and we have a ton of data on this now, is that although we are more connected, we're actually more disconnected as a country and as a world. And we are seeing how that impacts mental health, physical health, and emotional health. Now, my experience with this, well, actually, I'm going to take us all the way back to 2016. I started my business, and I'm fully bootstrapped. I started my business in 2016, and I was obsessed with my phone, with social media, with running people's social media. And I was a young female entrepreneur who was dying to prove myself. I had a lot to prove, and I had a pretty high, steep hill to climb. And so I spent hours and hours and hours on my phone. I worked easily from 6 a.m. to 11 at night some days, running campaigns, doing things, checking my bank accounts madly. And I was really obsessed with my life. At the same time, personally, I was also going through a challenging breakup, and I was very single. And so I was experiencing loneliness, and I was looking towards apps like Bumble to try to find connection. So I was spending more and more and more of my time online, trying desperately to connect and make it. Well, that led to burnout for me. What I learned about burnout was that when burnout hits, your body quits. I had not known this previously. This photo of me was back in 2019. Unfortunately, I had to go to the ER, and I was experiencing such incredible stomach pain. It was just so uncomfortable, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't think I had any health conditions, but I was just really running myself ragged and into the ground. And I took this ridiculous selfie. I knew it was ridiculous at the time. I said, this is ridiculous, but I took this because I said, this is my moment, that I am never letting this happen again. I am never letting my business or my time online come before my physical, mental, and emotional health. Now, the other frustrating thing here is this really ties into connection, because one of the things that many of us have learned is that connection and loneliness deeply impacts mental health. It is one of the leading contributing factors to depression and overall as that turns into mental illness. Now, you saw me just a slide ago, super connected, right? But one of the things I had done was I had made so many of my connections through the business that at this stage in my life, I had to take an Uber to the ER because all of my connections were through my business or through Bumble. And that was a really wake up moment for me, because I had never intentionally thought about my life and my personality outside of my startup. I was so obsessed with my brand and my clients and my customers and my employees and my partners that I really wasn't investing in my personal relationships that had nothing to do with business. And that was an aha moment. Good news though, I fought my way back. I told myself that was it. That was the last time that was going to happen. That was the last time that was going to happen. I started investing in my health. I started investing in getting my finances together. I started investing in getting my hobbies back and getting back to life. And I did that by really putting myself through a ton of different exercises. And that is how eventually I came to create this format that I'm about to talk to you about. That's how I came to GTFO, Get to Freedom Online. Now, I've been giving this talk for the last year, and it's gotten progressively bigger and bigger because this is such an important time and so many different people are dealing with this. And I'm thrilled that you all have tuned in here today because this is important. And it is important not only for us as individuals, it is also important for the youth that we are serving, not only through our businesses, but also through our volunteerism, through our parenting, and through our different connections and the people that we are going to mentor. Now, we're seeing more and more people really take a look and take a stab at what's going on. We recently saw The Atlantic publish, social media is attention alcohol. A fun product has the same downsides as booze. Instagram's own internal research makes the case better than any critic. We're also seeing this not just on social media. When I talk about the digital world, let me tell you, social media is a big part of the digital world, especially for us. We own a social media agency, but it's not the only. We're seeing Zoom burnout, and we're seeing Zoom burnout even being worse for people like women. We're also seeing really interesting things happen online. How many of you were personally attacked by the Instagram outage, the Facebook outage on Monday? Go ahead and sound it off in the comments because I know you want to, and this is a good place that you can do that, okay? But what's really interesting for me is I was watching my news feed after the fact because I wanted to see people's responses. And I follow a few big influencers. One of them here is Becca Tilley. She was a Bachelorette star like a while ago, or Bachelor star. Another one of these is Stephanie Rose, and she's an influencer as well. And, you know, Becca writes, I hate how many times I open the app and try to refresh it. You just go to it and you just go to it. And Stephanie seems to come to terms to here, maybe even come to Jesus moment about how many times she was using social media to get approval, applause. She's had a hard time. She's judged herself and others based on numbers. She looked for that attention and approval to creep into different areas of her life. And really, she kind of had that interesting come to Jesus moment. So we're seeing this come to light more and more and more. Now, this is really interesting, though, and this is why I am really excited to talk to you all today about the framework of the program that I have. This was a op-ed in Time by two young women who identify as Gen Z members. For those of you unfamiliar with that level, that means they're definitely younger than me, possibly by anywhere from 5 to 15 years. So you're looking at someone maybe in their early 20s, but they write that Instagram is doing grave harm to their generation and they need help to stop it. Absolutely, we need to help others stop it. But where I have concerns with this article and where I have concerns with what's going on in the world right now is how many different posts do you see that are absolutely 100% blaming Facebook, Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg himself. And I have to tell you, I agree that they need to be held responsible. But here, continues from the Time article that was an op-ed. These people are advocating for deeper regulation of the platforms. Now, I can understand both sides of that for sure. But what I struggle with is personal accountability. And what I really focused on when I was in my spot, and I was realizing I was massively overusing social media and technology and just massively having a relationship with work that was leading to burnout, I knew that I was the only person who was going to take responsibility to make changes. There was no one else that could do it. No one else could make the changes in my life. No one else could put up boundaries. I mean, maybe sure, we get a little bit more regulation with Facebook and Instagram, but what about my Slack? What about my Gmail? You know what I mean? What about my habits? And so I took a lot of time to have some recognition on what I was doing in my life. And I ended up coming up with this program. So this is GTFO, Get to Freedom Online by Getting Offline. And you do that with 4 steps: recognition, choice, then getting to the fun part of the freedom, and then more deeply having that connection. We're going to take a few minutes and walk through those steps, because that is what I really want you to take away from today's conversation, is having the recognition, the choice, the freedom, and the connection. So jumping into recognition, what does that mean? Well, recognition means being able to look at yourself and look at what you're doing and ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this helping me get where I want to go with my goals? Is this helping me get where I want to go with my company? Is this helping me be the type of leader or mentor that I want to be? Recognition also means recognizing red flags. Now, I want to go through a few red flags for social media overuse, and then I'm going to go through some red flags for just overall burnout. Red flags for social media overuse. You're opening apps unconsciously. When Instagram was down on Monday, how many times did you open it, checking it? How many times did you consciously open it though? And how many times did your finger just go there? Maybe you find yourself scrolling or watching, maybe it's TikTok, unconsciously for 10 plus minutes. Technically, the books that I have say that anything over 2 minutes is like very dangerous, but I put 10 because I think we need a little bit of wiggle room here. Maybe you can't remember the last time you went anywhere without your phone. Maybe even the bathroom. Maybe you just start to notice that you feel a lot of stress or anxiety when you are scrolling. When you're on here, maybe you feel it in your chest, or maybe you feel it in your gut, but maybe you just don't feel good when you're online anymore. Maybe you do want to spend more time offline. Maybe you're like, yes, I want this, but you keep falling into these habits or the routine of spending the time online. And especially from a business perspective, you are consuming. So that means you are taking it in. You are scrolling far more than you are creating. So you're posting, you're publishing. Now, red flags for burnout. This can look like physical changes in your body. When I was headed towards burnout, you be in the shower, you're washing your hair, and, especially for women, like a normal amount of hair loss is normal, but like you are seeing like aggressive hair loss. That's a good red flag. Maybe rapid graying, more inflammation in your skin or your joints, or an acceleration or exaggeration of any other physical or illness challenges that you're having. It looks different for everyone. A little bit here, we're going to talk a little bit to Danielle and Stephen about what they see in their physical, in their physical places, but also you might notice some mental changes. You might notice more consistent feelings of uncertainty, hopelessness, anxiety, fear. You also might have emotional challenges. And this is interesting because it might be strong feelings such as anger or sadness, but it also might be big swings between highs and lows. It also might be a lack of motivation or energy, especially for things that you used to love. Then there's also the financial stress, because that's one of the main categories. What are red flags that you might be headed towards that place? Well, maybe you're looking at extremely tight cash flow. Maybe you are looking at constant financial pressure and you are living on your emergency funds, or you're working over capacity with a lack of productivity. And maybe you just feel like you're constantly drowning in work, but you're still never enough. Maybe you've lost confidence in something that you are an expert in. A big part of recognition is recognizing these red flags, because if we can teach ourselves to recognize these red flags, then we can do something about it. The other piece here is understanding a habit loop. The reason we look to understand the habit loop is so much of our day-to-day activity are just habits. This comes from a book that I read in college. It's called The Power of Habit. There's also another great book out there called Atomic Habits. So that one's a little bit more new. This is like the OG of these types of books. But when we look at Charles Duhigg's habit loop, we look at the feeling or the cue, the routine, and the reward. So for example, if you're feeling, I'm going to use myself for an example. Okay. When I was younger, I told you professionally, I was maybe feeling like, oh, I need to go, I need to go grow my business. I need to grow my business. I'm not necessarily feeling like I have enough revenue right now. So that was my feeling. Well, my routine would be to pick up my phone. My phone is where I know to go. I know how to use social media. I know how to promote. I know how to communicate with others. And then the reward, there's often a very immediate dopamine hit there. And frankly, you could have a serotonin hit, you could have a dopamine hit. And then let me give you another example. If you pick up Bumble, let's say you're feeling lonely or you're feeling flirty. It doesn't need to be a sad emotion. I know I give two like sad faces here or an angry face, but it could also be like you're feeling confident, you're feeling flirty. Well, what's the routine? You open your phone up, you go to Bumble, you go to Tinder, you make a connection, the phone buzzes in your hand, bam, dopamine release. All of these platforms are programmed to give us dopamine, serotonin, or in Bumble or Tinder's case, oxytocin releases. Now, the reason that even we saw things like The Atlantic comparing Instagram to booze is when we look at other substances, they're triggering on those chemical centers in our brains the same way. Now, the reason I teach this, and by the way, I teach this program to kids as young as 16, is if we can understand this, then we can change it. Charles Duhigg says, to overpower the habit, we must recognize which craving is driving the behavior. And then we can change what we do if we can recognize that craving. Now, the reason that I bring this into the recognition point here is because our habits can start out as neutral, okay? Just because we use social media, that doesn't need to make it bad. Listen, you all, like I own a social media agency. I run a group called Keep Social Media Social. I love what social media can do for connecting communities, for activism, for entrepreneurship. I am an advocate for that, but a neutral habit can turn into something that no longer serves you if it's no longer being regulated. So a habit can turn into an unhealthy relationship. An unhealthy relationship can turn into an impulse control disorder. And an impulse control disorder can eventually turn into an addiction. And I know we're taught as youth to, in our like health classes, right? We're taught to avoid addictions. We're taught to avoid substances that we might become addicted to. But right now, GTFO is not in every classroom in America. By the way, that's the big scary dream. That's the big scary dream that I have, is to get this into classrooms. And I think we need to learn how social media really does touch on becoming habits and then becoming a not so healthy relationship and then going further into there. And I think that's important not only for the youth in our world, but I think it's incredibly important for us as adults. Now that brings us to step 2, okay? So step 2, once we've recognized that we've got something that maybe it's no longer serving us, maybe it's a habit that we don't want to continue, that's when we can have choice. This is one of my favorite things in life is choice. A lot of people would argue that choice gives you freedom. A lot of people would argue that you have to be responsible in order to keep your choices. To me, having choices is one of the most incredible things about A, being an adult, and B, being an entrepreneur. But sometimes it can be hard as an entrepreneur because we are the only people who can make choices for ourselves. We no longer have a boss telling us to get offline or do something. So we have to choose to set boundaries, disconnect, and we have to choose to make those new choices for ourselves. And that can be difficult as an entrepreneur. It can be difficult even in Denver Startup Week when we've got so many choices. We've got so many opportunities to be social and drink alcohol and go out at night and do it all again the next day. But that's when we really need to look at what are the choices that are serving me? Now, when it comes to burnout and using technology, I want to just show a few boundaries that can encourage choice. I believe that you can do this as an entrepreneur. I also believe that you can do this as a startup employee. I believe that you can do this as a normal employee. I believe that you can do this as an adult, but it takes some level of deciding to do it yourself. So here we've got an example of a Zoom free Friday. If you are zoomed out, have a conversation with your boss about how can I step back from Zoom on Fridays. If you are an entrepreneur yourself, maybe you don't take client meetings. Maybe you don't take certain types of work on Fridays. Maybe you turn your Slack notifications off. I'm so excited to talk to Steven about that in a little bit because his company actually has a policy around this, which I think is incredible. Maybe you set your Gmail to do not disturb. There are so many tools out there that you can utilize to help you set boundaries. There's also a few more that I'd like to say here. Number one, there are shortcuts in your phone to turn your phone to black and white. On your iPhone here, I think if I just, so if I hit this button on the side of my phone, this was just automatic. I didn't set this up. So if I hit this button on the side of my iPhone, 3 clicks and it goes to black and white. Now, who can chat me why this matters? Go ahead and put it in the chat. I'll answer it in a minute, but I want to see if anyone knows. Now, there's also boundaries that you can put even with Apple News. I got to tell you, there was a point mid 2020 where I was so burnt out of news, and it doesn't mean I'm not a good activist. Let me tell you, I am an engaged human being in our world and our planet, and I care deeply about our country and our community. But waking up every day to the constant abysmal news at a certain point was ruining my mental health. And I was like, I'm going to head towards burnout again if I don't set up a boundary with this. So I just turned the notifications off. Okay, let's see if we've got the chat. Let's see here. The notification icon is red, eye-catching. Black and white makes it not stand out. Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad. I'm glad that we're seeing that. The other thing is, like I told you all, that all of these colors, like when we look even at Instagram or Facebook or Gmail, when we look at these things, they have software engineers who study how colors work and how colors engage your brain. There's a reason that Tinder had the fire emoji in the red, and because it wants your attention. Red is the most powerful color to our brain that there can be. And so if we are just constantly seeing some of these things, that is so engaging to our brain. But when we turn into black and white, it's less engaging. So it's a great way to inspire more choice. Now, a few other boundaries. This is a very simple one, but it's very important. It's called a phone box. This is where my phone goes to live when I am done being on my phone. And part of the reason there's a phone box there is because, number one, then I don't lose it. Because if you put it somewhere and then you lose it, that's very frustrating. But if you intentionally put it in the phone box, that's where it goes. That's where it lives. Then this is another choice. I set up 2 different profiles. One of them is my work profile on my computer. The other one is a silly, playful, I call myself Mandy Lay Muffin. That's my personal. That's where I go to plan my trips or do my hobbies. And so I have 2 separate personas, and I'm not logged into Gmail on Mandy Lay Muffin. I'm not logged in. There's not even Slack on that desktop. So you can create 2 separate desktops. Now, another one, and I got to say, I cannot even say I'm good at this one because my boyfriend is on this call and he will straight up tell you I'm not good at this one, but it's closing your computer to eat. What a concept. Still working on that one, but it's an incredibly good boundary and it is important. And it's something I do try to do intentionally, but I'm still working on that, on developing, on strengthening that habit. Now, these are a few other resources. I'm going to have you go ahead and screenshot this slide if you'd like to. There's a few other books that really helped me in this journey. Essentialism, Deep Work, Digital Minimalism, and then very transparently, I was really bad with my phone when I was going through my journey. So I got something called the Phone Addiction Workbook. It's zero fun, transparently, like it's not a fun workbook, but if you are at a place where I was, it's a good resource. And then the other thing is Toggle Track. That is a time tracking app that my company uses. And even as the CEO of my company, and now as an entrepreneur, I commit to using Toggle Track because it lets me know when I am messing around with time. And I thought this was funny. This is Gregory McCohen. This is the author of Essentialism. And so when essentialists, what they call themselves, when essentialists hear that Instagram, Facebook, and WhatsApp shut down for 8 hours, didn't even notice. Whereas a lot of other people really noticed. Okay, so neat. I'm offline. Now what? Now the fun part. Now we get to get into freedom. And with freedom, I also want to touch on the joy of hobbies. As entrepreneurs, I think we can get really, really, really stuck. Even startup employees that I know, people who work for startups, it can be very easy to make your career your entire identity. I did that for many years. I know many people who did that for many years. And it's because it's fun, it's rewarding, it can be financially rewarding. But truly, everyone I know who's kind of come back into the cycle of getting over burnout, refinding their sense of self and their personality and their hobbies is a really big deal. Now, the other side of that is we deserve rest. When I was deep in my journey, I would say around 2019, I had to make this my affirmation and my mantra for going to bed at night, because I would be laying in bed and my brain would be buzzing with, there's still more ideas to do. There's still more things to implement. I still have that thing on my to-do list. What about that thing for that client? What about this for this? I need to talk to my employee about that. And my brain would just be moving. So I developed a tactic. I got really into physical notebooks. Everyone knows it's a really big part of my life now. I did a brain dump before bed. So anything that I could remember, anything that came up. And then I laid in bed and I repeated to myself, I deserve rest. I deserve it. I earned it. I worked hard for it. I deserve it. And that's really important here. And it's an important part of not burning out is recognizing that we don't always need to be moving. We don't always need to be reading. We don't always need to be watching something else on the internet. We don't always need to be networking or hustling or doing all of this, anything. We can do nothing, and we deserve to do nothing. Now, when you're done doing nothing, there is the joy of hobbies. This can be so incredibly important. And so I've put some hobby ideas here. If you want to just screenshot even that little portion, go ahead. Part of the reason I put that there is to just kind of stimulate some ideas, because if you have been very obsessive about work, sometimes you're like, I don't even know what I would do for a hobby. That's how I was. And one of the things that I found very successful was to go back into my childhood and think about, like, either what did I always wish I could do as a child, or what did I love to do as a child, or what did I start doing, or what have I never done before that I want to do. Now, an important note here is because a lot of us are startup entrepreneurs, or we work in the startup space, there can be a lot of A, pressure, and B, there can be a lot of pull to monetize a hobby. I have to tell you, I started creating art earlier this year. By the way, that's my shed. I'm spray painting a mural right now. I've never done that before, just because I really wanted to learn how to spray paint. And as soon as you do something cool, someone's like, oh, you should sell that. Like, you should sell that. You should get paid for that. I want to caution you not to do that. Do not monetize your hobby. It's your hobby for a reason. And you don't need to be phenomenal at it. That's the most beautiful thing about hobbies, is you just need to enjoy it. Now, that gets us to the final point in the system, is connection. Connection, not only with others, but also with ourselves. When we spend so much time online, and we spend so much time being inundated with requests from others, whether it be through work, direct messages from people on social media or LinkedIn or on Slack or on email, when we spend so much time reading Apple News or listening to podcasts, we can lose the conscious connection with ourselves. And that conscious connection is incredibly, incredibly important as entrepreneurs. That lets us hear our inner voice. That lets us feel our gut. That lets us really, really connect with our intuition. Everyone has the power to connect with our own intuition. No matter the age, everyone has that power and that ability. But when we become so inundated, that connection is broken. And so it's incredibly important to get offline, get away from work, be silent, rest, do a hobby, and then let there be silence and reconnect with our inner self, or some people say our higher self. And when we've been able to connect with ourselves, it makes it easier to connect with others. And that can happen offline. There are still so many ways to be social offline, even right now in this time period. Connection deeply impacts our mental health and our mental well-being. So when we think about Charles Duhigg's habit loop, okay, we can think about how can we create a new system for ourselves? How can we have that recognition? Then how can we make these different choices? How can we then get to the freedom that those choices allow us to have? And how does that come into connection? And how do we let that connection spur the dopamine, spur the serotonin, spur the oxytocin? Then we can choose to get back online and back to work with intention. And that is what makes us incredible entrepreneurs, leaders, and mentors. So with that, I am going to, by the way, that was GTFO, Get to Freedom Online by Getting Offline. I am going to stop sharing really quick, and I am going to unmute and invite both Danielle, and Stephen to our panel here. Welcome.
Hey, Amanda.
Hi.
Hey.
How are you both?
Great.
Good. Welcome to our panel. I'm so excited to introduce you both, and I'm so grateful that you've come on here willing to talk about your burnout journey. It's not always the easiest thing to talk about because, you know, it does impact your mental and your physical and emotional health. So thank you both in advance for your vulnerability. Before I introduce you, I am going to go back to the chat and say at this point, anyone, I am going to say as we introduce the panelists and as we get into our questions, I am going to invite you to ask your own questions, and I am going to be monitoring those while we talk. Okay? Cool. Okay, Danielle, I am going to start with you. I would love for you to introduce yourself, and I would also love for you to tell us a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey, and then, of course, your journey with burnout.
Okay. Yeah. Where do you even start? I'm so glad you're having this topic. Such an important topic for everyone, but really for folks who have started or thinking about starting their own business or are in that space. So I'm the founder and CEO of the Daily Boss Up, which is a digital leadership and life coaching platform. So we're meeting folks with career coaching right where they are in their phones. So just heard all of that conversation. And I have a finance background. I've been a chief financial officer in several industries for much of my career. I am also launching, so this is a great time for burnout conversations, a private equity venture fund here in Colorado that's place-based for BIPOC entrepreneurs and founders. And so spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs in the business space, a lot of time coaching folks in this space. And I'm just really excited to be in on this topic. I kind of describe myself as a person with two speeds, 0 and 60, and have been on the journey to finding speeds in between, which is this burnout discussion for much of my career. And I'm a mom and a wife and all of the other roles that we play in life. And so how do we take care of ourselves before we hit the wall, which I have hit numerous times in my career over and over again.
Yeah. It's definitely hard to avoid, especially when, like you said, you were very young in your roles in starting this out, and you are a mom. So I'm excited to kind of come back to that and see, how do we balance that? I know balance is a funny word, right? Balance. But how do we look at that, and how do we try to avoid that? So thank you. I'm excited for you to be here.
For having me.
Stephen, I'm going to go to you next. Like I said, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your company and your background and your experience with burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I do that, I just want to say how grateful I am to share the platform with two beautiful, inspiring people, Amanda and Danielle. And Amanda, I'll have to say that I actually learned something new today. Thank you for your slides.
Yes.
As a single father, I have to say that many of the things that you spoke about are relevant to me on a daily basis. And for sure, I'm going to be using some of your tactics to hone in on my weaknesses. So thank you for that. Okay, my name is Stephen Quang. I am the co-founder and CEO of Curacubby. We're a software company based out of the Silicon Valley. We also have offices in El Paso, Texas, as well as Salt Lake City, Utah. What we do is we converge two disparate systems that programs in education, recreation, and family activities typically need, and that's the finance part as well as the workflow operations part. So we service about 500 organizations right now across 18 states. We're growing like crazy, and that can lead to burnout, right? So it's a relevant topic for me as an entrepreneur, but I will also note that I am not your typical Silicon Valley or prototypical Silicon Valley founder CEO. I'm actually quite different. I'll tell you all the things I don't have. I don't have a CS degree from Stanford. I don't have an MBA from UC Berkeley, although I did graduate from UC Berkeley in liberal arts. My background is quite different. I'm actually an immigrant refugee from Vietnam. I came to this country when I was 3 years old, of Chinese descent. And really early on, I was, let's just say, given the pressure by my parents to have one outcome: succeed and make a lot of money. So those two things are not easy to achieve by any stretch of the imagination, especially when you don't speak English. So I founded my first company when I was 12 years old. I grew up in Oakland, California, and I'm going to date myself. This is during the golden age of hip hop. So I was a DJ, and yes, right? I was a DJ, and then I started a production company, and I produced music and did a lot of mastering. If you're familiar with hip hop from the Bay Area, many of the underground groups I've worked with, I was a tour DJ for the Loonies for a short period of time. Yes, and that was actually there was a violent incident at a Loonies Rapping Forte concert that ultimately got me exiting the hip hop business. Right, so. So from there, I graduated from Cal Berkeley, and this was during the initial .com boom. I joined a technical recruiting company, which was a startup. Shortly after there, I founded my own technical recruiting company. Did really well until the internet bursted, and then all the money kind of dried up. So I had to switch, and I went into the fitness business, started several fitness companies, and you know, the irony is that I would probably still be in the fitness business if it wasn't for a pivotal event in my life. This was the diagnosis of my son being on the spectrum. So at that point, I shifted focus away from my entrepreneurial desires and went into looking for services for my son. Ultimately, we decided that there was nothing that fit him quite well. So we actually founded a school, which is now a California NPS. We service 70 families now, which is pretty nice. And it was during that time, working in the back office, that I encountered all of these problems with payment, workflow, finance, accounting. And that was sort of the foundation for building Curacubby. So that's my unlikely journey. And I hope that context is helpful as we talk about burnout. There's a lot of burnout opportunities in each of those micro journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to come back to the burnout. I'm going to jump over to Danielle really fast too, because Danielle, I do want you to tell us just a little bit more about your community, Bossed Up, and just give us a little bit of background, even of when did it start, where are you now? Because I like I said, I love that background, because as then we jump into burnout, I'm going to have you reference, you know what I mean? Come back to the journey, because I think that is for everyone that I've met, that's a big piece of it, is like, you don't necessarily just hit burnout the first month that you are starting up. This is a long journey. There's different points in it. So why don't you tell us just a little bit more about your background there?
Yeah, burnout has compounding effects like interest is what I say. So yes, there's been a journey here. And it's interesting. I started the Boss Up like so many entrepreneurs, and what Stephen just said about starting a school is like there was a problem that I encountered. And when I was in it, I didn't have a solution for it. And so eventually in my career, I created that solution. And it really came from the fact that I became a chief financial officer for the first time when I was 26. So I had been out of school for 4 years. It was in the state government at the health department here. And so most of the folks who worked for me had been working there longer than I'd been alive. I had 2 bosses up to that point in my career while I was in college, and one when I graduated. So I didn't even have anyone to emulate. Like, I had no concept of leadership, the technical skills, the impact that would have on me in my career. And so many folks don't. We don't really give coaching. We don't have folks doing the soul work of leadership, is what I call it, soon enough before they're responsible for a 30-person team and they're flailing. I was certainly confident I was going to get fired. And so I remember writing in my journal, I've been a journaler since I was 15. If I'm going to go down, I'm going to go down being myself. And for me, that meant telling the truth and being vulnerable. And the most sort of shameful place for me in my life was that I became a mom when I was 16. So my son Kai is now 19. And I'm not ashamed of Kai, but you can imagine being a teen mom, like, you don't want people to do the math. You're worried about credibility, all of the imposter syndrome that I was carrying with me everywhere, like this blanket that covered my journey. In my career, I hadn't even told anybody. Like, I wasn't even sharing that with my team. And I decided to, and it changed my life. It changed the journey. And it taught me that leadership is a technical skill in itself. And so I went to Comcast. I was a vice president there. And I did a TED Talk in 2017 about millennials and leadership. And I got all of these emails, like overwhelming emails, very similar topics, very similar, like thirst for knowledge. How'd you do it? What'd you have to avoid? These conversations, right? Burnout, and so I decided to start a blog that ended up getting a lot of traction, and we monetized that into the Boss Up. So that's how we came with the Boss Up. I was working in an executive job in a Fortune 50 company. I had teams in 7 states. I was traveling 70% of my time, and I had started a company. So there's a moment, a critical moment that we can chat more about. And then the Boss Up did well. I was able to leave corporate America and get that moving and just have my business going for many, many months. And I'm still really young. Like, I still feel like I'm getting started right now. And so exploring in myself as I was building my own business and figuring out, like, it really helped me understand what was motivating, demotivating in my life, like what it meant to not have a team around me that I had been used to for the last 10 years. Those types of things along the journey. And like most women and most people of color, we start our businesses while working full-time and use our W-2 income to do so. And so that has certainly been my journey. We are launching another phase. I'm doing a fundraise now for this next phase, and that's a whole new skill set I'm trying to flex and be uncomfortable in that space, which can create burnout if you're not ready for something new like that. Rejection and trying to get folks to buy into something that you're doing, all of that is a part of the journey, the entrepreneurial journey. And we start these things because we're passionate about stuff more and more. These businesses are for people, not built on people. And I think that comes with another level of pressure and burnout. And that we all have to explore, because I'm excited for a world where entrepreneurs like Stephen are building these businesses across the country. And I understand the toll it must take, because I experienced that myself.
Yeah, thank you. That's phenomenal background. Okay, so for both of you, I want you to tell me basically about a time that you burned out, and just give us, I'm going to have both of you do it in about 3 minutes per person, you know what I mean? So, or less, but just give us a time you burned out, kind of what was surrounding it, and using the framework that I just gave, right? Recognition. What were some red flags that you were headed towards burnout that maybe you didn't see then, but looking back now, you can see those red flags? Who wants to go first?
I just talked, so I'll let Stephen start first.
Awesome.
Oh, that's so kind of you, Danielle. Okay, so there it is. Well, there have been many experiences that I can probably cite, but I'm going to go through the one that I think is most interesting. This was my senior year in college at UC Berkeley, and I was trying to graduate, trying to convince my parents that being in the music industry was like the thing to do. Although every single day I would hear from my mom, like, "You're bananas. You're gonna study like law, business, or medicine, one of those three, but not like, what is this business stuff?" So I was deeply entrenched with trying to convince my parents that I'm going to be successful in the music business. So this is my senior year in college, and I was managing my record label, my business. I was producing music. I also took on the A&R job of another record label. And by the way, the poster's back here somewhere, right there, Bay Area Players. There was like Master P was on there, E40, all the iconic names from the Bay Area. So I was the A&R and project manager on that album. And so midterms came up, and I remember one day waking up and my whole face was orange. You didn't hear me say red or blue or pale or gray. It was orange, literally the color of a carrot.
Wow.
And I thought, I was like, was I out in the sun too long, or like, what was going on? And then so I went into the bathroom, and then I like got ready to go to school, take a shower. I was like, holy crap, my whole body was orange.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I didn't feel anything abnormal. This is just like shocking. I'm like, what is going on? So I did go to school, and it was really weird because like I was trying to like wear hats and hoodies and try to hide myself. Ultimately, it didn't go away within 24 hours. So I went to the hospital, I went to the ER, and I remember them telling me like, "Are you under a lot of stress?" And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
When you're like at that age, what is stress? It's like there's no definition of stress because you're Superman. You can do whatever, and no one's ever going to tell you anything other than that, right? So they're like, well, try these antibiotics. So I've given all kinds of medication, and nothing really helped. But ultimately, I had to take several days just off, not because I was feeling sick or feeling any sort of physical symptoms, but I was frankly embarrassed because here I am, this very social character. My job was to like corral all these rappers and producers together. I'm not going to go meet these people looking like, Carrot Top. That's not so. So I took several days off, and I remember it was like day 4, the symptoms started to dissipate. I started getting my color back. But it was and another thing too, I remember hair loss. That was another thing. That was really strange. Like, I have great hair. Like, what is this like, So those two things. And, ironically, if it wasn't for vanity, I would still have been at it.
I got to tell you, vanity was my thing too. Danielle, I want to hear if you've ever experienced hair loss or something with the vanity, because I have a normal kind of like just a little bit of a deeper cowlick right there. But I was really losing hair, like really, and mine was vanity too. And then I went to go see a doctor, like, why am I losing so much hair? And that's when it was like, oh, you are under a ton of stress. You're not eating. Because for me, it's so easy just to like forget about food and just go straight into work. And so, yep. My vanity too was a good red flag.
125 pounds senior year in college. Talk about not eating. I was not eating. Yeah.
Danielle, have you experienced any of those type of physical red flags?
So my body tells me I'm in trouble before my mind will let me let me think that. And, you know, so in retrospect, I have been what I call crashing, burning out, hitting these walls since I was a little girl. Like I can now look back and go, huh, yep. Like I wouldn't miss a day of school and then couldn't, you know, there would be a week every school year where I just was so sick and tired I couldn't go.
Yep.
But I think the most acute moment where I realized like something's got to give, you're going to have to understand what you're going through. I had started the Boss Up. I was still at Comcast, and I remember not being able to sleep. Like it was the opposite of like sleeping all the time. It was waking up at 4, working till 2, and then like my body would wake up at 4 thinking. So I wasn't sleeping. I had almost no appetite. Like my skin was horrible. Like I mean horrible. So the vanity thing is real. I mean, I like had cystic acne for the first time ever, all stress based. And I remember like I would drive home from work at like 6 o'clock at night sometimes and pull over and have to take a 20-minute nap to drive from the tech center back to Central Park. And I was just that exhausted. It was overwhelming exhaustion. I was like, it's debilitating. I remember telling my mom, it's debilitating. Like, you know, and people will say to you, someone with all this energy who's doing a million things, oh, like, of course you're tired. But I was like trying to explain to people, no, I'm not tired. Like, it's not being tired. This is different.
Mm-hmm.
My body is shutting down, it feels like, on me, and to the point where I have to pull over while I'm driving. Like, that's not normal. I'm 30. And I was like really trying to get, and then I would start to lose like feeling in my fingertips and my feet. So they would go numb and tingly. And so it was terrifying because they thought I had MS. And so getting all those tests, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disorder. And so it was quite an eye-opening experience about not just that moment of burnout, but all the moments of burnout that I had pushed through and thought, you know, you just needed to rest for a couple of days, but really I hadn't rested mentally at all, and had felt guilty the whole time when I laid down or took a week off or took a vacation. And I knew like I had to totally change my relationship with crashing and burning in that moment if I was going to be able to have a long career.
Yep. Oh, I fully understand. Now, okay, so I'm glad that we're talking about red flags for us as individuals, right? But one thing I also learned this last year, I manage a team, is how to recognize burnout in others. Because, you know, as Danielle, you said, your body let you know before you know mentally. I do think as leaders, and whether we are, you know, whether it's our employees, whether it's our mentees, or whether it's our kids. And I'm not a mom, both of you are parents, but do you have any advice, or can you tell us about how you recognize burnout in others? And Stephen, I'm going to let you go first on this one, and then Danielle, I'll come back to you.
Oh, so kind of you, Amanda. Thank you.
We're just very polite here.
Sure. Let's do it. So let's talk about employees first. So we are, you know, we're in startup mode. Our team is relatively small. We're about 30 people. So I think the first thing that I recognize in terms of clues or flags is that our team's ability to problem solve, it goes way down. The levels of creativity goes way down. Whereas in contrast, when they're really energized and rested, you couldn't get them to shut up when you're like, right? You know that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then the other piece that I've also recognized is that there's a direct correlation between team burnout and internal interdepartmental conflicts.
Oh,
I've measured that this year. I've had
Okay.
many conversations. I
this
talked to
is
my friend.
fantastic. Yeah. Tell us about this.
Yeah. So it is ultimately about so I'm a firm believer that you can't silo mind, body, and spirit. They're one and the same. They're components, right? They make us, so like if you're spiritually deficient, you're gonna feel that in your health, physical health somewhere, right? If you're emotionally and mentally deficient, you're gonna feel that spiritually, vice versa, so on and so forth. So what I've come to believe, and I've collected a lot of data on this because I'm just a data collection person. I found that during the times where interdepartmental conflict is at its highest is usually when we've had unlimited amounts of Zoom meetings. extreme amounts of deadlines crammed into 1 week, right?
Yeah.
And then what happens is that when we are feeling the pressure and we don't have the adequate modes for recovery, we're going to be short with each other. First of all, you're short with yourself because you're disappointed yourself, right?
Yep.
And then you reflect that upon other people, right? So then it's like, typically if you're a balanced person and if there's a challenge, you're going to say, well, what am I learning from this challenge? Like, how can I be a better person? When you're not rested, you know what happens? It's your fault.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's
So those are the two signs, like low creativity, the inability to problem solve efficiently, and more interdepartmental conflict. Those are the flags.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you, Danielle.
Oh, those are so good.
Those were real good, Stephen. Good job.
I agree. The level of conflict over the last year and a half when we're on Zoom and not in person and doing the reciprocal energy thing is impactful. It's been the conflict has been high, and like little signs that folks are burning out is one is email traffic. So when your team is starting to use email a lot more than the phone or walking down the hall to talk, to try to sort through things, that's always a sign to me that people are tired, right? It does take more energy to get up and pick up the phone and have a conversation. It also is way more efficient for most conversations. And I'm so guilty of this myself. I'm such a super millennial. I'm so guilty of this myself. I want to text. I want to send you a quick email. I want to send you a quick note. And I'm like, no, pick up the phone, hear somebody's voice, get it taken care of. And so I noticed my team, the email traffic, especially interdepartmentally, Stephen, is like has been high when folks are starting to hit the wall. And the other thing is around sort of the ability to see what's possible versus see what's already been done. So I always listen for those cues, like we're getting stuck in, oh, we tried that. Oh, somebody did that before, right? Or you can see that like something in the past that might have been motivating because it's new and it's cool. And most people want to be in that space where when we're healthy and aligned with ourselves, we want to be in innovation space. We want to be creative and we want to brainstorm. And like I on purpose hire folks who see what's possible. Like I am that way, and I need to be surrounded by people who believe that too. Or I start to die inside. And I know when it gets tired, it's easier to go, that's not possible, because then I don't have to move. And it's the same people that can fall on either side of that conversation, depending on where we're at from a team burnout perspective, or dynamic shifts can cause that. Even different people as teammates, right? You lose one or you get a new one, it can totally shift the dynamic, and you start to see people hit walls quicker.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Thank you both. So moving us kind of through the framework then, right? We've really covered recognition, and we're going to move into choice in a second here. And I'm really excited to pick this thread up, but I want to ask either one of you, do either one of you have anything else, either individually, just anything under recognizing, either recognizing when you're at capacity? Is there anything else you want to say before we move on to then, okay, let's make some different choices?
I think that a part of getting this right, and none of us get it perfectly right, not our personalities, right? Because they're sort of ripe for burnout. who we are, really. It's part of that's just something to accept first. There are personalities who, no matter what you do, what job you give me, if I'm bored, I'm going to turn it into 7 jobs. If I'm not challenged mentally, I'll find a way. So I have a personality that I have now accepted about myself that is what it is. And so that's one part of recognition that I want to give people a little freedom around. Stop beating yourself up because you see other people who don't hit the wall. Great, we need them too. But for us, the folks that I know are on this call, let me just say, like, you are who you are. Wherever you go, you're going to take you with you. So you're going to keep trying to find places where this won't happen to you. It's you. So that gets us into the choice part.
Well, I think that's so true. I also think that's part of the big reason that I said what I said about hobbies and not monetizing every hobby is, I have to tell you, there have been times in my life where I'm like, I want to be I want to be strong at it. I want to be good at it. I want to be, and I had to really give myself this permission that I don't want to be the best at it. I don't want this to be how I make my income. I don't want this to be where I am developing this skill to be an absolute excellent leader in this area. I want to just have fun with it. I'm also going to ask our group right now. I want to see some questions that you all have in the chat about burnout, about anything that you have. It might be, I mean, truly anything that you'd like to ask. The floor is yours, but let's move into choice. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start with others, okay? Because I think we just had such a good conversation about recognizing it in the team. Number one, do either of you have like proactive policies? Stephen, I know you do, so this is kind of a leading question, but Danielle, I'm interested in hearing from you as well. Either proactive policies or proactive culture points in your businesses or in the businesses that you know what I mean right now, even with what you're creating, Danielle, to try to avoid that burnout, or at least get a hold of it before it really runs away with the entire team.
Yeah, I think as leaders, our number one job is to meet people where they are. And if you can figure out how to do that well, you will help people stay away from burnout more often. And that doesn't mean people aren't working their tails off for you. I've never had that issue. It's about how they're working, when they're working, what hours of the day are they working, where are they working from? We're grown. And I firmly believe, and don't know how to do it any other way, but to let people be grown. So I like to draw the finish line and like to tell people when to get across the finish line. Sometimes I forget that part, but they remind me about deadlines. But they all can get there differently. And I have learned to let that process happen. It's a beautiful process, and we all learn from each other, and folks can use their energy, which is the thing that can create burnout or prevent it, is to manage one's energy in ways that best fit them. And I think that companies are going to have to get this right and better going forward. I think one thing that I'm doing some consulting on is around inclusive compensation, what I call it a menu of things, which is around, even, let's say we pay $100,000 for this job. Why does it have to just be salary? Why can't it be a mix of things? I want Fridays off and that's worth 10 or 20 grand, or I want to work 6-hour days and that's worth 10 or 20 grand off of my cash. People are at different phases in their life that companies can really meet them. And as a CFO, I can tell you it actually would save you money to do inclusive compensation as a company. And those folks will never leave. Even without a raise, they're not going anywhere. Because I know in 2 years, when my son goes to college, he's in college now, but think about me as an employee. In 2 years, when my son goes to college, I'm going to have different priorities than I do while he's in high school, right? And how you compensate me for the life I'm living today should be more flexible, right? And if I'm getting closer to the end of my career, maybe I want you to put 40% of my stuff into a retirement account. Like, there's so many ways that we could give people options to really like live more whole, because it's us not being our whole selves that drains us and creates burnout. You heard the pressure in both of our burnout stories, the someones, the somethings needing us to do the things that didn't just feel right even all the time, right? I felt misaligned usually before I'm burnt out, or I'm unhappy in an environment for too long of a period of time, and I end up burning out. So I think making sure that folks can come as whole as they can and can be vulnerable and authentic by leading with vulnerability and authenticity and creating safe space for that, to just let folks be. When I got divorced 3.5 years ago, my team is the first group I told. My parents are still pissed about that. But like I told them because I knew I was going to show up differently. And so rather than let the stories get created, them get frustrated with me get frustrated with them and myself, I just said it and I put it on the table and said, I need help. And like that creates an environment where folks stay healthy mentally.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to come back to one of the things you said, because I'm really excited about it, and it is the inclusive compensation. But I want to hear from you, Stephen, first.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I even go into my thing, Danielle, you and I have to talk about inclusive compensation after this. We have to talk. Okay, so I'll start off by saying that let's make no mistake about this. Policies and procedures often do not go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. So we have policies. We have very what I would consider strong policies to enforce this finer balance of like your family life, your personal life, and then your work life. We've even had to go as far as publishing our policies in a Forbes magazine article to get this point across. And still to this day, we are in like violation of these policies on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I don't know how else to enforce it other than to go to people's homes and turn off their computers for them, right? So
well, wait, tell us about the policy first so that makes sense to everyone, because that makes sense to me, but tell us what the policy is.
All right, so let's start off with Slack. So we have Slack hours, and then we have a designated Slack channel for after hours, and we have a calendar for that particular channel. So if there's ever an outage, an emergency, it's not a fire alarm for every single employee in the company, right? And that was the case prior to this policy. Whenever there was a fire, somebody would be like, oh my God, this customer site went down. And then everybody would get blown up. Everybody's jumping in. Everybody's contacting the same customer. And customer's like, we love your service, but we don't need 30 people calling us at the same time. So it's like not only creating a lot of anxiety internally for ourselves, but we end up creating unnecessary anxiety for the customer as well. So for Slack, you know, you have your 9 to 5 based on your time zone, your normal Slack hours and your Slack channels. As soon as 5 o'clock hits, there's one channel only. And if you're not on that, if you're not set to be on that channel that day, you're not going to get notified. So that's Slack. Okay. On Gmail, we are enforcing scheduled sendouts. So if it is after 5 p.m., you cannot hit send. You have to drop down, find the time during the next day's business hours to send.
Love it.
And then finally, we have one sort of a cultural policy thing. It's like, let's not all cry wolf. Because we're a startup, everything is an emergency, right? Everything is an emergency. So we're asking all of our team members to really take some time and, you know, just ask yourself, like, is this particular subject matter, will this subject matter warrant like an all hands or all points bulletin? And oftentimes it's not. So we're just trying to remove as much static from the culture as possible, right? While at the same time, you know, creating some boundaries for like your life, your family life is important. Trust me, your spouse will appreciate this. Your kids will appreciate this, right?
Yeah, I love it. And I do certainly understand that while we can have that as policy, the actual is, it is. And again, that's why it comes into the daily habits, and that's in everyone individual. And Danielle, as you say, people are growing, you have to, you know, and so you do as much as you can to set the policy, set the culture, and try to enact it. But I don't think that any company is perfect in terms of like their boundaries with that. So yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. One note I wanted to make, going back to inclusive compensation, we do this, and so my business, I'm a small bootstrap business. When I say small, you know, I'm you know, I've got 4 like full-time team members and a few different contractors. But we consider that in people's rates, people's salaries, you know, like, and I create every single compensation package individually based on what that person values and wants. So if someone is sitting on this call thinking about like, oh, well, I'm a solopreneur and I need to make, you know, I might be making my first hire in the next year or 2 years, you don't need to be a big company to think about inclusive compensation. This is something that you can act immediately as an individual. And it's by getting to know the person that you're working with and getting to know them. My interviewing process is now slower. And even my process to make someone into a W-2 employee is way slower than it used to be, because I'm taking that intentional time to really get to know them. And then the hope and the intent is that I have something that we both love, and we both have a work schedule that we both love. And so then that really, from a retention standpoint, like Danielle said, that's the goal, is to retain them for far longer, because I don't know where they could go to another company and be able to just be like, yeah, so I want this. Do you know what I mean?
And we need small companies to do it. It's much easier to turn a paddle boat than it is a ship. And so the small companies have less margin often, right? Or, you know, And this is a money saver, right? Like one of the things in the list that I'm pitching to these companies I work with is like, why don't you have the daycare contract? You can negotiate economies of scale. People aren't paying post-tax. You can reduce it from their salary. They're not going to care, but it's less money in the end because it's not post-tax money. You create an environment that they know you care, and that you care not about them, just them, but their children, and that is a part of their lives. Why aren't we doing more of that? And by the way, it's a gigantic write-off. Like we those of us who know businesses, right? Like connecting these dots around like, this is good economy. And coming back from COVID, mass exodus from the labor market, I don't know if companies are going to have a choice but to get creative here. Like we're going to start meeting, and because people burned out, and they're like, I'd rather scrap than have to go through that again. And people were sitting still long enough to realize how tired they were, or realize that they were unhappy, or all of the things. We saw so many women exit the workforce, and I think burnout and trying the expectation that we would do it all was too much. And we saw a lot of director and above women leave the workforce. So we're not just talking about entry level because the work wasn't available. We're talking about a choice.
Oh yeah. And everyone I know made a choice. And yeah, it is interesting. So companies absolutely will need to start doing that. I love it. Well, where I want to move us to, we've got just a little under, or just a little over 10, sorry, math right now, trying to do math while I'm looking at this, 12 minutes left. So what I want to do, I do want to look at Matthew's question. And this also, this brings us into our next place, where it's kind of that freedom. Do you know what I mean? Like the hobbies. And I do want to talk to both of you about now balancing your personal lives, your hobbies, the ways that you recharge. I know, Danielle, you've got a concept called intellectual self-care that I really want to get to in this point. Matthew asks, for choices, I'm an engineer and I am also a designer in my business, but my hobbies are also inventing. So I have a singular track and it's hard to relax even in my own hobbies. How do I overcome that? Have either of you struggled with that before? And do you have any insights to share with Matthew? Yes, I see Stephen nodding his head too. Yeah.
I'll go first because I really want to hear Stephen's answer, especially because you have this amazing breadth of like skills and things you're passionate about. It's like, I just got to hear this. So I'll go quick. And I just got to admit, like, I'm not great at this. Like, I don't have a lot of hobbies that aren't my family, my kids, my work, my friends. My love language is quality time. So for me, like if I get a moment where I can sit and have wine and laugh with my girlfriends, or laugh, with my employees, like that really energizes me. I say I'm always listening for laughter, and looking for like this energy where you are seeing this motivation that comes from me and comes from other people, like listening for laughter and looking for motivation in people to know that we're on the right track. Like sort of the intrinsic motivations. When I got divorced, that's the first thing my therapist asked me was like, what do you do for fun? I was like, oh crap, I have no idea. What are you talking about? My work's fun. And so it's similar to Matthew. The things I love, I actually am so fortunate to be doing so much of that for a living, this storytelling and those types of things. But I think recharging for me really looks like meditation, and it looks like stillness. And because stillness is not something I have in my life, it looks like balance. Like my kids buy me coloring books now to help when I have anxious moments, because it's so the opposite use of my brain, and it's such a balancer. And so I would just recommend, even if you don't know something's a hobby, or even if you don't, like, I don't love to color, I just realized that it really helps. Like it just gets me out of one side of my analytical brain into the creative brain in a really cool way. And anxiety is like creation, or like being overly creative, and it's coming out of you in a way that is causing anxiousness. And so is there something totally different than how you use your brain? Even if you love the way you use your brain, it sounds like, is there something totally different that you could do even for 10 minutes a day just to balance the brain? And for me, that is the way I have to look at it, because I am so in love with work. And so for me, it's like, how do I make myself more productive and healthier and less irritable?
I love that. I love it so much. Oh, Stephen, over to you.
That was great, Danielle. I loved all of that. That was excellent. So I come from a place where I believe that in order to succeed in life, in any areas of life, we should remove this fallacy that we can do it alone. I truly believe that. Be it a human being, an animal, higher source, you can't do it alone, right? So with that being said, what I've done is particularly in COVID, I've really tried to make connections with people in ways that I've never been able to do before. So, you know, as y'all can imagine, I am a workaholic, much like Danielle. When you say fun, I'm like, work, that's fun. Like that's my go-to default. But I'll give you like an anecdote. Like so recently, I've been trying to get myself to do things that are just a little bit scary, but nothing that's gonna, you know, risk my livelihood or my life. So for instance, my friend bought me a wetsuit, and like I'm not like, you know, I've taught myself how to swim recently. I'm not a swimmer. So she bought me a wetsuit, and she's like, we're gonna go jump in the Pacific Ocean with this wetsuit on. And I'm like, holy shit, this is kind of scary. But here's what happened. It completely short-circuited this whole side of me, right? That I have to worry about the work and what do I do for fun? All those things were done, short circuit. And all I could think about was like, how am I gonna survive this cold ass ocean? And I've never been in a wetsuit before. How do I put this thing on, right? So you don't do it alone. You do it with someone that you trust. You build those connections and you make it into a supportive experience that's a little bit risque. So it's like you have the combination of that feeling that someone's there for you, someone is going to support you, but you're going to embark on something that's a little bit dangerous. So that's how you short circuit it.
I love that. And I would say, yeah, Matthew, like if you can figure out something that scares you a little bit, do it. I mean, so for mine, it's a bit of horseback riding. I mean, you are on top of an animal. I cannot be thinking about buying this. I can't. And by the way, we are adults now. So you can Google, like, where can I go horseback riding in Denver, Colorado this weekend? Like literally like long sense it out. There are amazing things on Google. And then scary, you have to like maybe pick up the phone or make an appointment, but like there are so many possibilities to make something happen. So like Matthew, even going back to thinking about like what might scare you a little bit, do you know what I mean? What might get you into that place? Because yeah, Steven says it's impossible to think about anything else when you've got a little bit of that fear and then also you want to talk about like the release of chemicals. You get a little bit of adrenaline. Oh my God, you got some dopamine, you got some serotonin, like you're having a good time then. That's funny. Okay, so I want to address SNL's question. He asks, I have a seasonal business. It's like drinking from a fire hose. Then the off season seems aimless. Employee retention is difficult due to being a service-based business. That totally makes sense. And I just have to give up absolutely everything during the busy months to be able to make an income. I definitely know entrepreneurs like this. I am burnt out every year at the end of the season, and I cannot keep going through this cycle. Do you have any suggestions for seasonal businesses? Wow, great question, SNL. Danielle or Steven, do either of you have any suggestions for our viewer?
You need a damn good forecasting CFO, because I have a fundamental belief that there are seasonal businesses but you don't have to have a seasonal operating model. So my brother has one of the largest roofing companies in the nation, Elite Roofing, he started. And so building his ops model and helping him get that, it's the exact same thing. Like you can imagine, like the summer, you know, hail season, it's insane, or there's a big storm. And it was just insane in the beginning, and their financials matched that, right? And what I say is that it does not have to be that way. And even back to what I was just saying about, you know, just a really quick tip is that stability is such a huge thing for employees. And so is there a way to think about even the way that you pay folks across the year versus how much you pay them during the season in a way that could create bigger margins? But I definitely, that if you can get a good financial modeler to help with this, that would be really amazing to help you sort of get out of the model that's making it feel as seasonal as the business is. So the model doesn't have to match the fact that the business has the high peaks and the low peaks, if that makes sense. So I mean, I could literally talk to you about that forever because it's so fun, but I would get a financial consultant to help you rebuild that model, and it wouldn't be too expensive, and it will be game changing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the things that SNL can look for is like, if you're not to the point where you can afford a full-time CFO, that's okay. Fractional CFO. I'm going to give a plug for a company, if that's okay, because I think you're spoken for, Danielle, right? Otherwise, I can't in that area. Okay.
I'm pretty spoken for, but I know people.
Okay.
If you send me an email, I'm happy to get you in touch with somebody, because I want to avoid burnout. So I'm not going to take on anybody else, but
love that. Yes. But I also, one of our clients is called VCFO. So, and they have a Denver office. So if anyone wants to, if they're like, oh, fractional CFO, VCFO, or you can reach out to Danielle and get some referrals as well. But love that answer. That's so amazing. What I want to do now, we've got 3 minutes left. I'm going to come back to you both for closing remarks. And as we go to closing remarks, I want to really, again, one of the last things that we need to touch on here is that connection with yourself. And also I'm going to have Danielle, if you want to drop off any recommendations in the chat too right now, you're good to go. But that connection with yourself, that consciousness, I know we've both kind of spoken to that a little bit, but like, how do you reconnect with yourself when you've disconnected? I know, Danielle, you briefly mentioned meditation. So let's answer that question. And then how do we find you? How do we connect you? How do we support you? Danielle, I'm going to have you go first, my friend.
Yeah, I will. Thank you. I mean, this is the practice I've learned in the past few years, more and more. And I think that to do this work and to avoid burnout and to keep yourself, and I say balance as an energy thing, not as anything that happens external, because that isn't real. Like, everyone's definition of balance is different. People could look at my life and think I got it all figured out, and people could think it's a nightmare, right? And that's irrelevant either way, as long as I'm balanced energetically. But you have to know yourself so well. And I think Stephen hit this a bit, which is that we live in an individualistic society that is causing folks to burn out. And so it is so important to know yourself and to share those learnings with other people and let them help you work on you. Let them be there for you. Ladies, I'm talking to you. Let folks be there for you. Let them take care of you. And I think that is really what I'm learning, is the power of reciprocal energy. The people I'm surrounding myself with are giving and feeding me as much as I have in the last 15 years of my life, and was just never getting my tank filled back up. And to kind of be unapologetic about who is in your life and who has access to your energy. And then recognize the times where your energy gets drained more quickly. I do a lot of public speaking, but meet and greets are hard. I for a long time felt like I was getting hit by a bus after, and it's because I'm not a small talk person. I'm a go deep or don't go at all person. And so I would just have these like little 5-minute exchanges with people, and I hated that. I wanted to know more. I wanted to help more. I wanted to be able to say more. And I remember coming home and being like, why is my energy so screwed up? And so now I know how to manage that environment differently. And so for me, it's like, if you know yourself and pay attention to those moments, pay attention to the red flags, and then really be able to try to just maneuver intellectually around that, you can be in better shape.
Love it. Okay. How do we support you? How do we follow you? How do we connect with you after this?
Yes, follow me on all the social medias. I just dropped my email in there. I
think it only went to host and panelists. Can you redo that to go to everyone?
Sorry, Sarah. Sorry. I was trying to give you info and I only sent it to the folks here. Let me do everyone. But yeah, I'll drop it right here into the chat. I'm really easy to find, and it might take me a couple days to respond to you, but I promise I will.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, Stephen, over to you, my friend.
All right. I think it starts with, at least for me, it starts with the concept of forgiveness. And this is to forgive yourself. I think it's difficult to proceed in life and to progress when you're conflicted with your past, when you're conflicted with decisions that you've made. You're just not going to go anywhere, because for every one step forward, you're going to take a couple of steps back because you're stuck, you're angry. You have to let all that shit go. That's it. Just let it go. Forgive yourself. And then almost instantaneously, you have to accept that in order to be powerful, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be, because if you're not vulnerable, you're not going to have the invitation to allow other people that are genuinely loving and supportive that come into your life. And I'll say this again, we don't do it alone in this life. If you think you do, we're going to be on different paths, because I am of a firm believer that we're always being supported by other energies, whether we're conscious of that energy or not. We're always being supportive. So the moment that you're vulnerable, you're going to be able to recognize that these things are coming into your life, and your awareness of these things will actually give you the day-to-day tactical, pragmatic skills to move forward. So I know this sounds super philosophical, but I'm like a big Lao Tzu fan. So if you read, you read the Tao Te Ching, he's going to say the most powerful energies in this world are flexible, soft energy, like brittle, hard energy. What does that represent? The fall, leaves breaking, trees crumbling. That's not life. Life is soft, subtle, vulnerable, and flowing. So forgiveness will lead to that. That's it.
I love that.
Can I say one more thing, Amanda? I know we're over
Yes.
time, but I just want to say this to folks. It's like a little homework to do around this. Write down, who do you want to be for a living? That's the goal. What we do for a living is just the plan. But who do you want to be? And then you're going to realize how close to that you already are. And so then you'll give yourself a break when you think you're chasing the thing that you already are. And so I just want to every year get closer to who I want to be for a living and in this world. And that's what I work on. And it causes less burnout at this stage of my career, even though I'm busier than ever.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, you both. This has been so lovely. Stephen, how do we support you, connect with you, find you?
Absolutely. I love connecting with people. I think, people are our teachers. Every single one of, our best friends to our worst enemies are all our teachers, and that's the only way to grow. So please connect with me. I just dropped my Instagram in the chat. If you are in the business of education programming, recreational programming, family activities, and you guys are needing software to optimize the back end, you can find me at Curacubby. I'm on LinkedIn as well, and I have a Twitter handle. They're all Stephen_Quang, and it's in the chat. So thank you for the plug,
Awesome.
Amanda.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for your time. Thank you for everyone who has attended here. And thank you, Denver Startup Week, and all of the sponsors for giving us the time. I hope everyone has a great day. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye.